This program is brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
Since the Lebanese were unable to reach an agreement, the only way to decide on an international tribunal was through a UN Security Council resolution. The resolution was welcomed by the ruling majority and its supporters, but the opposition saw the decision as a foreboding vindictive act meant to resurrect the dead and perpetuate sectarian division in the Lebanese arena.
The Lebanese people received the news of establishing an international tribunal under Chapter 7 in New York by lighting candles. Some Lebanese visited the grave of Hariri, but most of them stayed in their homes, overcome by fear of threats to security. After 836 days since the assassination of Rafiq al-Hariri, the Lebanese embarked on a new phase that they hope will be easier than the previous one. This road has been reopened after 836 days of closure. But will this lead to the opening of political solutions that will put an end to this country's crisis?
هذه المسألة يمكن اعتبارها بأنها أنهت
This could be considered an end to one issue, but it opens the door for other issues in regard to the government, the presidency of the republic, and the new problem of Fatah al-Islam in Nahr al-Bared camp. There is talk about the possibility that the majority will present more initiatives to prepare for the phase after the court makes its decision, but I do not think that this is a simple matter.
The ruling party talks about the desire to extend a helpful hand and to find solutions to all unresolved matters. However, if the opposition insists on its position that accuses the majority of disruption, things will not stop.
Now, there is a resolution under Chapter 7, under which matters will take their legal course, and we will no longer need the parliament.
As for the Lebanese, their opinions differ on the tribunal, even though they share the same worries over security.
I'm like any other Lebanese citizen, and like any mother with children. Of course I'm afraid. I'm afraid every morning when I send my children to school. I feel as if I'm saying goodbye to them because I don't know if they'll come back home. The same with me. Maybe I'll return, but maybe not.
The International Court has now become a fait accompli, but only time can determine what it will achieve in reality.
Joining us from Damascus, Syrian Parliament member Dr. Mohammed Habash. Let us start with the main question. Why does Syria refuse to cooperate with the International Tribunal? And why does Syria say that the tribunal is a violation to Lebanon's sovereignty? If this is the case, then why did Syria cooperate with the investigative committee?
Syria was never consulted about this tribunal, and thus one cannot say that Syria is opposed to it. Syria believes that one of its neighboring countries is facing a problem because of this tribunal, but so far Syria was never consulted about it. It will deal with it in a way that does not violate the Syrian sovereignty. The Syrian government's cold reaction towards the tribunal reflects the position of ordinary people in the streets. They do not feel that it can actually try the criminals who have been committing crimes in Lebanon.
The truth will be uncovered. But why is Syria concerned about Lebanon's sovereignty? Perhaps the Arab League should have a say about this. But what business does Syria have in Lebanon's sovereignty? This is the business of the Lebanese. The majority of the Lebanese want this tribunal.
No, the Lebanese are divided on this. The division amongst the Lebanese is not the business of Syria. It is a Lebanese affair. Everyone knows that the two previous parliament speakers did not want the international tribunal. But now, the third parliament speaker, who has the majority in the parliament, has managed to push for the tribunal based on the 7th chapter of the United Nations Charter. We should remember that all international resolutions that were adopted based on Chapter 7 have brought catastrophic catastrophes and wars to the nations that were subjected to them.
Dr. Mohammed, the leader of the Future Party, Saad al-Hariri, said that Syria must first concern itself with practicing its sovereignty on the Golan Heights before concerning itself with Lebanon's sovereignty.
I want to say to Mr. Hariri that we in Syria do not need lectures about sovereignty from anyone, just like he said that he does not need lectures about sovereignty from others. What we are asking for is not related to the crisis over the tribunal, which we were never consulted about. We are just expressing people's concerns. Will this court dare try those who have killed 1,300 Lebanese since the assassination of the martyr Hariri?
Saad al-Hariri said that there has been 35 years of killing in Lebanon and no one has been charged for the crimes.
Many people were tried in Lebanon and many were imprisoned, but Saad al-Hariri freed them so they can work with Fath al-Islam. He wanted to create a Sunni armed force to counterbalance other armed groups. So far, 1,300 Lebanese have been martyred. Will this tribunal dare to issue indictment papers to these true killers? There is an entity that without any hesitation acknowledged the killing of 1,300 Lebanese using planes to shell hospitals and other places. Will this tribunal dare issue indictment papers to this killer who committed a new Kana massacre? Will this tribunal dare try those who killed more than 60 or 70 Syrian workers?
Who are you referring to?
I am referring to the Israeli killers. Of course I am referring to Israel. They killed the Syrian workers in Lebanon. I also refer to those who killed many Syrian workers in Lebanon. The International Tribunal does not dare charge those who were responsible for killing people. This is why people are not comfortable with it. We feel that all resolutions that were adopted based on the 7th chapter of the United Nations Charter have caused new wars to the nations that were subjected to them. Now, the resolution to form an international tribunal was passed, but I hope that our friends, the Lebanese people, will not be subjected to catastrophes due to decisions made by an institution based on the 7th chapter.
Thank you very much, Syrian Parliament member Dr. Mohammed Habash.
قالت وزارة الداخلية الأفغانية أن 16 من عناصرها لقوا مصرعهم وأصيبوا.
The Afghan Ministry of Interior stated that 16 of its members were killed and 6 others were wounded when members of the Taliban ambushed a police convoy in the Zabul province. Meanwhile, NATO and Afghan forces carried out a military operation in the Sangin area in the Helmand province. According to a statement by the Afghan Ministry of Defense, 20 members of the Taliban movement were killed and injured in the operation. This comes after NATO spokesman in Afghanistan said that 7 of its soldiers were killed in a Chinook helicopter crash in Helmand in southern Afghanistan.
شينوك في هلمند بالجنوب الأفغاني.
نادرة نسبيا حوادث تحطم وإسقاط مروحيات قوات التحالف.
It is relatively rare for international forces helicopters to crash in Afghanistan. However, the losses of such crashes are painful. According to a Taliban spokesman, a Chinook helicopter like this one crashed in the Kajaki region in the Helmand province in southern Afghanistan after being hit by Taliban fighters. A NATO commander said that 7 of its soldiers were killed in the incident. However, according to a source from the Taliban, 35 people were estimated to be killed. Helicopter crashes have killed at least 55 American soldiers in the past 2 years.
المروحيات تلك عن مصرع 55 جنديا أمريكيا على الأقل خلال العامين الماضيين.
The helicopter crashed in a hostile area. The initial evidence indicates that the crash was caused by enemy fire.
ولاية هلمند في الجنوب الأفغاني.
The Helmand province in southern Afghanistan is described as the most unstable region in the country. It is one of the strongholds for the Taliban movement. It is also the world's largest grower of poppy seeds, which are used to make opium and heroin. The Kajaki region, where the helicopter crashed, is the site of a massive operation to reconstruct a dam in order to provide electricity, a project that is being financed by the United States. The British troops are the largest segment of the international forces conducting military military operations to protect this dam in the Helmand province. If it can be confirmed that the Taliban downed the helicopter, then the movement, which had vowed to escalate its attacks against the international forces in Afghanistan and provide hundreds of suicide bombers, may have demonstrated that the killing of its military commander, Mullah Dadullah, has not affected its operational capabilities. The downing of the helicopter occurred as government statements indicate that 20 members of the Taliban were killed and wounded in the Helmand province, and 6 Afghan police officers were killed in an ambush by the Taliban in Zabul. Notably, an Afghan Ministry of Interior statement stated that 25 members of the Taliban were killed and wounded in clashes in the Farah province. This news, in one way or another, reveals that the Taliban is attempting to extend its activities into western Afghanistan, near the Iranian border. Estimates indicate that more than 15,000 people were killed in the past 16 months in the southern and eastern regions of Afghanistan, where the Taliban movement is active.
حيث تنشط حركة طالبان.
وعلى الصعيد الفلسطيني التقى رئيس الوزراء الفلسطيني.
The Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas met with his Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh in Gaza to discuss ways to stop the Israeli aggression, strengthen the national unity, and support the international ceasefire agreement signed by Palestinian factions. In his first public appearance since Israel threatened to assassinate him, and without going into detail, Haniyeh announced that he intends to make changes at the top security level. Meanwhile, on the ground, 2 Palestinians from the Qassam brigades were martyred in an Israeli airstrike in the Gaza Strip. This news comes as the Israeli occupation forces continue to carry out raids in the Palestinian territories. Palestinian officials and the Egyptian security delegation, which is staying in Gaza, continue to exert diplomatic efforts in an attempt to broker a bilateral ceasefire agreement between the Palestinians and the Israeli occupation.
ما يزيد عن 60 شهيدا وعشرات الجرحى الفلسطينيين ضحايا.
More than 60 Palestinians have been killed and dozens of others have been wounded since Israel started its aggressive campaign 3 weeks ago. Amidst the blood and flesh of Palestinian martyrs, the international community continues to remain silent. Meanwhile, the Israeli Air Force continues to target Palestinians and carry out raids on their homes and neighborhoods. The bodies of Mahmoud Hamouda and Omar Rahyan, both from the Qassam brigades, were burned and torn into pieces after they were hit by an Israeli missile in Gaza.
Israel continues to unleash its vicious and criminal cycle. It continues to target the civilians and shell Palestinian homes and populated areas.
I tell the Arabs, we put our faith in God. We put our faith in God. You hear and see what Israel is doing, but you don't have feelings or emotions to do a thing about it. Where is the religion? And where is Islam?
Meanwhile, the Palestinian Presidential Office and government continue to make contact with several regional and international constituents in an attempt to find ways to stop the Israeli aggression. This comes as Palestinians continue to discuss a presidential-sponsored initiative which offers Israel a cooling-off period. According to unconfirmed reports, the Israeli occupation offered the Palestinians a proposal for a bilateral ceasefire agreement.
We have a proposal presented by President Abu Mazen. The Palestinian factions will present a response to this proposal. Israel also presented a proposal for a cooling-off period. The Palestinian Presidential Office, the government and the president and the Palestinian factions will examine these proposals separately.
In a response to the ongoing Zionist aggression, which includes a series of assassinations and airstrikes, the Aqsa Martyrs, Jerusalem, Qassam, and the Salah ad-Din brigades claimed responsibility for the shelling of Sderot and other Israeli settlements in the western Negev. In addition, some Palestinian factions rejected a ceasefire agreement full of concessions that comes amidst the ongoing Israeli aggression.
We do not accept a ceasefire agreement that comes amidst the Israeli aggression and the ongoing killing of our people and the destruction of their capabilities. Palestinians have the right to defend their country and protect their citizens and their property.
Amidst political efforts to broker a bilateral ceasefire agreement between the Palestinians and Israel, the latter continues to escalate its aggression in the occupied territories. Meanwhile, the Palestinians confirm that they will not sign a ceasefire agreement full of concessions and they will not give in to the Zionist blackmail.
Israeli government ministers have branded as scandalous the decision by Britain's University and College Union to promote a boycott of Israeli academic institutions. Meeting in Bournemouth late yesterday, the UCU approved the boycott motion by a vote of 158 to 99, charging that Israeli universities cooperate with the occupation of Palestinian territories. The UCU decision also called for freezing all European Union funding for Israeli academic institutions until, quote, Israel complies with the United Nations resolutions. Education Minister Yuli Tamir sharply condemned the measure, saying she would contact her British counterpart on the issue. And Welfare Minister Isaac Herzog, who handles issues related to anti-Semitism, spoke with Britain's ambassador to Israel, Tom Phillips. It is especially troubling, said Herzog, that the discriminatory and one-sided decision was taken in a nation which is considered friendly to Israel. Phillips added that his country does not support the boycott, adding that the best way to promote peace is by creating dialogue between the two sides and that an academic boycott does not further this aim. We now welcome Andrew Balcombe, Chairman of the British Zionist Federation, to discuss this issue. Thanks for coming in, Andrew.
Thanks for inviting me.
How serious is this boycott in your eyes?
It's serious. It's serious not just because of this union, but it's starting a roller coaster. We've had the journalists, we'll be having the architects, we're having the biggest public sector union, and we're having architects. It's difficult, but we're prepared for it.
What is the source of all this anti-Israel activity, in your opinion?
I think Britain today has the largest amount of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism of anything in Europe. The unions are being taken over on this issue by very left-wing Socialist Workers' Party people. In this particular case of this union, 250 people voted out of a union of about 130,000 people. So it's a very, very small minority.
Of the Republic welcomed all attempts to open the door of cooperation with America to achieve mutual interests away from pressures and threats. Meanwhile, the advisor to the President and the head of the National Conference of South Sudan criticized the policies of the American administration, which will isolate America from its people. He said this during a meeting with a delegation of visiting American investors.
Bashir Omar al-Bashir, the president of the Republic of Sudan and head of the National Conference, reiterated that the continued pressure from the American administration, including its increased sanctions on Sudan, are attempts to cover up for American crimes in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Palestine. During his meeting at the National Conference headquarters with a delegation of African businessmen and women who are currently visiting the country, al-Bashir said that the American sanctions aim to strike a blow to the Sudanese economy in the name of human rights violations in Darfur. He indicated that these sanctions will ultimately and directly affect the Sudanese people, especially since the companies which are being targeted support thousands of families. The president also added that the companies being threatened with sanctions are mainly agricultural companies and sugar plantations, which have nothing to do with Darfur, do not operate there, and have no involvement with armed groups there. He added that sanctions like these, which the U.S. administration is imposing on Sudan, will increase the security and humanitarian problem in Sudan. For their part, members of the delegation confirmed that Sudan has a good environment for investments, and they mentioned the crimes committed by the American government against their people.
The impact of the sanctions affects investments from other countries involved with Sudan. As a matter of fact, sanctions hurt Sudan, especially the poor. We are working to offer support for the citizens of Darfur in the fields of health and education.
If he is concerned about that, then he would not impose additional sanctions on Sudan. If the American government was sincere about its commitments and pledges to build Sudan, why did it impose more sanctions on Sudan? This situation has made it more complicated for the Sudanese government, especially in relation to the humanitarian conditions.
The advisor to the president and the head of the National Conference of South Sudan, Dr. Riyad Gikok, said that Sudanese laws guarantee equal rights and privileges to both national and foreign investors. The Sudanese presidential advisor criticized the U.S. president's policies, saying that they will lead to an isolation of America from the international community, and said that the policies are themselves based on policies of degradation and oppression, as well as a disregard of the will and sovereignty of the people. He said that imposing new sanctions on Sudan aggravates the problem and does not contribute to resolving it.
Crowds of people lining up at a police recruitment center have become the latest victims of a suicide bombing in Iraq. 25 people are now reported to have been killed. Police say the bomber detonated himself among recruits gathered near a checkpoint outside the center in the town of Fallujah, west of Baghdad. 50 other people were wounded. Police stations and recruiting posts have been a target of Sunni and Al-Qaeda fighters.
Around 65 kilometers away in Baghdad, the new security plan has now been underway for over 100 days. There's a new general, tens of thousands more troops on the streets, but more US soldiers are dying now than ever before than the plan began. In fact, the May toll was the highest since November 2004. 3,461 US soldiers have been killed since the war started in 2003. 122 of those soldiers died this month. That's over 3 times as many as the figure for May 2003, just after the invasion. That month, 37 were killed. In both 2004 and 2005, despite a peak in attacks on US soldiers, the death tolls remained stable. 80 troops died in May of each year. In 2006, the number of US soldiers killed was slightly down. 69 died in May that year. But since the security plan was implemented in February, it seems that the death toll is rising again. Iraq's correspondent Hoda Abdul Hamid explains.
As the thousands of US troops flagged for the Baghdad security plan began pouring on the streets of the capital, the number of casualties among US troops increased sharply. The new strategy was described as clear, hold and build, a dramatic change from the tactics used over the past few years, where US troops retreated to their fortified bases after brief incursions. Now, step 2 of the plan requires soldiers to stay in those same neighborhoods they presumably cleared of weapons and fighters, leaving them vulnerable to attacks by armed groups who proved that they retreated to only come back with more firepower. The US presence on the streets has also meant more casualties among Iraqi civilians. And while the Iraqi government is forbidding the media from covering the aftermath of attacks and is concealing the number of Iraqi deaths, the US is unable to do so. The number of American casualties has now become the one tangible sign that the security crackdown so far isn't producing any real changes on the ground. In fact, the Bush administration has given itself some leeway, stating that the first results to be felt by the residents of Baghdad will not be before the end of the summer. George Bush also warned his own people there will be more casualties among soldiers as the security plan unfolds. By the end of June, all the troops will be in place. However, with poor results so far, this latest increase in troops has made the war even more unpopular in the U.S.
I feel that it's a shame that a lot of innocent, soldiers are dying, and we should do something to bring them back home, and stop this war and look towards helping other people, that need the help.
There wasn't even a reason to go into the war to begin with. Bush lied to get us into the war.
May 2007 is the deadliest month for Americans since November 2004, when thousands of troops were involved in an all-out war against Fallujah. They had managed to clear the town, but the violence just spread elsewhere. This latest plan, many in Washington call it a last-ditch attempt, is at the moment slowly turning Baghdad into one big battlefield. The Bush administration is reportedly already looking into new options, a desperate search for success before the presidential campaign kicks off next fall. Hoda Abdul Hamid, Al Jazeera.
The views expressed on Mosaic are those of the participating broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. Please visit linktv.org/Mosaic for more information about these broadcasters or to view previous Mosaic programs, obtain program transcripts, or receive the weekly Mosaic Intelligence Report. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Feyerdahl Foundation, the Otto Haas Charitable Trust, and by committed Link TV viewers like you. This program was brought to you by Link TV for educational and non-commercial use only. Link TV is the only U.S. television network devoted to global and national news, with uncompromising documentaries and diverse cultural programs which connect you to the world.